The Centre presents a new podcast, CBmE&U, a podcast devoted to promoting awareness and debate around controversial ethical issues in biomedicine. So welcome to the third episode of CBmE&U. Today we've got Professor Roger Foo, the Vice Dean of Research, and the Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan Professor of Medicine, I hope I got that right, here at the Yong School of Medicine at NUS. Thank you for coming on our podcast, Roger.
Thanks, Julian. Thanks for having me.
So, Roger, thank you for coming. I have some quick questions to get to know you a little bit better. The first one, coffee or copy?
Coffee, Sinead. Definitely coffee.
All right. Can I just ask, is this like a flat white or an espresso?
No, very black. Nothing else in it. All the fruitful fragrance and aroma of how a coffee should be, which does not exist in coffee. That's why it's coffee.
So does this mean you like batch brew and filter coffee?
Yeah. So every morning there is a routine of grinding the beans and putting it in a pour over, weighing the amount of water that goes in, and in the 4:2 ratio that makes the coffee taste better.
I'm so impressed. I recently went
But it does take you half an hour to do all that. So.
It must be very therapeutic though to go through that process.
Yeah, it's the routine, right? So it clears the mind for the day.
Thank you. Second question. What country would you like to travel to the most?
Yeah, so I'd say Egypt, which I haven't had a chance to, mostly because I am really up for history. And I remember feeling so thrilled when in Greece I managed to touch the walls of Mycenae. I don't know if you know this place called Mycenae, that they say it's 3,000 years old, all the stones of this parts of the ruins. And I really want to do the same with Egypt and the pyramids and all that, but just not had a chance and not quite brave enough to go.
Understandable. Final question, my favourite question. What song would you sing at karaoke?
Sinead, my goodness, I don't think I ever have found myself in a karaoke, to be honest. So when I was much younger and foolish and getting married, I was made to sing on stage for my wedding, and it was a Chinese song that I sang. I could tell you what it is, but it would be very funny and strange.
Please go for it.
It's something to do with the moon being round and shiny. In Chinese, it's 月亮代表我的心. So some of your viewers might understand that.
I will go away and do my research. Thank you.
Okay, Roger. So you want to go to Egypt, and you know you've got the pyramids there, and here in Singapore you're building a pyramid yourself. I think it was at the Shangri-La Hotel. I saw Minister Yong introducing your massively important national initiative, and you were there with a giant piece of ice and an ice pick, and you were talking about the iceberg of cardiovascular disease. So tell us about Project Reset that is dealing with this iceberg, and what this iceberg is, and what your pick constitutes.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. So we came to a realization as a whole group of researchers in cardiovascular disease on the island that we've been spending all the last 10, 20 years studying disease in the hospital. So this is your tip of the iceberg. People with your heart attacks, strokes, full-blown diabetes. But actually, there is a lot of unknown disease in the rest of the population, people who haven't yet presented to the hospital. And yet, all of that disease is quite scary if you think about it. 40% of our Singaporean adults are thought to have fatty liver disease. All of them kind of red flags that they are marching in the wrong direction. So the whole of Project Reset is set out to study these people under the iceberg, apparently healthy, but actually not quite. We want to map out all of their metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease spectrum, where they are, in which stages they are, and so on, and figure out whether there are subgroups of these people. And if they're in these different subgroups, what characterize these different subgroups, and how we can pick out people from one group from the other, and what we can do for them each differently.
Yeah, I mean, just before I pass on to Sinead, it's incredibly ambitious and important thing, 40% of the population. I urge everyone to sign up to Project Reset. I tried to sign up myself, but they wouldn't let me on because I'm not a permanent resident. sad. So, I mean, how important do you think it is for the ordinary person to take part in this, or what sorts of people can take part in this?
Yeah, very, very important, Julian. Again, thank you for the shout out on this. But there is quite stringent criteria that we are imposing on the project, because it's not just all comers. So it's aimed at recruiting or enrolling 3,000 people specifically, and we think that we have to at least go through 10,000 or more to get to these 3,000. Mostly because the criteria is quite stringent. You need to have a fair amount of cardiovascular risk. So there's something known as the ASCVD calculator that you can go online. Doctors do that. When your primary care doctors see you, they do that. It's a calculation of things like whether you have hypertension, how high is your cholesterol, whether there's family history, smoking, etc. So after all of that calculation, if you come up with a risk of 5% or more in the next 10 years of having a cardiac event, you're considered moderate to high risk. And these are the people we want for reset. So, Julian, you may not qualify for reset anyway. It should be a good thing. But if you do, or if anyone does, it really would be a good project to sign up to.
Okay. My first question for you, I was reading a little bit about your project, a very small amount. And I was really intrigued in the way your research has highlighted the difference in Asian and non-Asian disease presentation and trajectories, and how it's really poorly known how heart disease affects Singapore and Asians more broadly. And I was wondering whether you think that the Reset project will begin to balance that racial gap in medical knowledge, or if you think we still have a really long way to go.
Yeah, there is still quite a long way to go. I mean, it's usually with questions like this, whether you're looking at it from this angle or that, half cup full or half cup empty, at least we're making progress towards it. It really is a sense that in Southeast Asia, the disease spectrum seems to be quite different from, let's say, the West. Some statistics, for example, is that a lot of heart attacks and strokes, even I discovered the other day, are happening in people in their 50s. Or younger even now than in the West. I presented some early reset data in a meeting in Germany a few months ago. And right before me speaking was another professor speaking about heart attacks and so on. And his age group was 70s. So late 60s to 70s, we're at least 10 years younger. And apart from that, a lot of our heart failure patients that come through are presenting for the first time with heart failure, whereas in the West, you might have already encountered a doctor for chest pain, implying some blockages in the arteries in an earlier age. And then when you actually get heart failure, it's not surprising. Whereas for a lot of us, we're presenting with heart failure at the outstart.
So you must have some hunches that you want to test in this project. What are your hunches for these differences between Asian populations and Western populations?
Yeah, thanks, Julian. So it's still very much along the lines that we have metabolic drivers here, and maybe also the immune drivers. They're very intertwined, both of them, immune and metabolism. And for whatever reason, I think it's a mix between genetics, so nature, as well as nurture, whatever we are encountering in our environment. And these two drivers seem to be very high up in what's happening around here.
Just to follow up with that question, it's well known that health and disease are significantly affected by nature, genes, but then also things like lifestyle and access to healthcare. I was wondering the extent to which a reset will be able to identify and understand the role of socio-environmental factors, the nurture, as contributing to poorer heart health in Singapore and Asia more broadly.
Yeah, Sinead, that's a really nice talking point. I have to admit that now that we're already quite actively and almost exponentially recruiting on Reset, we're finding that the people, and not surprisingly, the people that step forward are not of the fullest spectrum of the socioeconomic groups you would think of, right, in Singapore. Maybe it's to be expected. People who want to find out more about themselves are a bit more educated, a bit more well-read, and they're queuing up, knocking at the door to sign up for Reset. It's the people who are busy working, needing to, think about other things of living and sustenance, and they're not really that bothered to come to your research program. So we have to find ways to even out and assess all of that more thoroughly, I think.
Will that be a limit to the study if you don't?
I think so, yeah. The reality is that we do have 3 ethnicities, first of all, in Singapore, in different ratios. But a lot of this kind of research requires sufficient numbers to make the statistics hold together. So if you recruit equally 3,000 divided by 3, then you end up diluting your statistics because there are things that you want to study per ethnic group. So it's not an easy game. There's a lot of trade-offs that's being discussed in the team.
So what are you doing to try to get to these groups that aren't coming forward for, I mean, this is a general problem in research. People should understand that, often, it's really those who are most disadvantaged who least take part in research and so don't benefit from the results. I mean, what are you doing to address that?
Yeah, the easy answer I'd say to that, Julian, is that thankfully we are not the only research project on the island that's covering this huge spectrum now of primary care and population health. There are other means to get to such data as well. So, for example, in our Western cluster and UHS, we're all on a unified electronic medical record system now, EPIC. And through that system, a lot of cleaning up is being done. So we're actually seeing the full spectrum of the entire population through the whole socioeconomic spectrum and pulling out all those data. So where we think Reset will go is to build a really deep level of data set on this very specific group of people. And then we have to find means of extrapolating to whatever we can find in the real world EMR records data.
So, it's going to run for 5 years, and let's assume it's as successful as you hope. What could the average Singaporean expect from it? How would their life be different in virtue of having done this study?
So the way I see success, I've been thinking about this for quite long. Maybe a few different things. One would be some set of markers that would be more accessible and significant. So it's reducing the dimensions of the full spectrum of everything we're measuring down to a select set of markers. They could be molecular markers. They could be some genetic markers. They could also be some lifestyle markers because each Reset person is getting a smartwatch.
Oh,
so yeah, exactly.
Sign me up.
Yeah, so everyone gets a smartwatch and they're encouraged to keep it on 24/7 for the next 5 years. We're also we have a budget to refresh the smartwatch if it breaks down. And from the smartwatch information, you're actually literally picking up dynamic information on what people are doing and how they're living lifestyle, sleep, etc. So a set of markers that would be useful to pick up people most at risk and knowing what they're most at risk of. Because as I mentioned, some are for heart failure, some are for fatty liver, some are for blockages in arteries, etc. And another would be, because this is very much a discovery project than a initial epidemiology search for and trying to make a risk calculator project. So that's quite a different way of thinking. Because it's discovery, we think we may also come up with some new gene targets for new therapies, new treatments, new molecules that can be targeted for different purposes. An example of a huge, great success story is whether you like it or not, the injections that people are using for obesity and at first diabetes and now obesity. So those kind of molecular targets might be quite interesting might be quite a good success thing to come out of Reset.
So maybe we'll come back to sort of gene therapy later and Ozempic and these weight loss drugs. But from what you say, it sounds like at the end of the project, you might tell me, oh, Julian, you've got a higher risk of heart disease than you thought. Are there going to be things that these people who are given, that have these markers and now realise that they're at greater risk than they thought, they're actually part of the iceberg? I mean, are they going to be able to do anything about it?
Yeah. So that's the beauty of also part of the Reset project. Embedded within Reset is a small randomized controlled trial, RCT. We're taking 200 out of the 3,000 to carry out an RCT where we're doing intensive lifestyle.
I just have to tell the listeners what an RCT is.
Yeah, randomized controlled trial. So The randomized control trial is to test out 200 people in 2 arms, so 100 in each arm. The test is on an intervention, we call it an intervention, of a lifestyle health coach plus some AI factored into an app to improve activity, sleep patterns, and maybe some well-being factors as well. So the whole notion upon that, on that, or underpinning that, is that there are still lifestyle factors that can be used in some people's lives to improve their trajectories if you want them to avoid going to the tip of the iceberg.
I'm fascinated by the fact that Reset is focused primarily on preventative health, because recognizing that, you know, once a health condition is there, there is only so much medicine can do. And so I'm fascinated because, you know, preventing health conditions in people is no easy task. People are fully rational and generally cognizant of the wrong they're doing to their bodies, but the lack of will is often, and, you know, the lifestyle reasons such as multiple jobs, stressful family situations, all of these things can prevent people, you know, pursuing the health goals they really want to do. So to what extent, I was interested in to what extent this AI, this wearable AI technology, these lifestyle coaches, are going to be more about motivation, or whether or not there's going to be some sub-level of nudging to get people to finally achieve the goals that they want to.
Yeah, Sinead. So here I start to, you're pushing me to wander into very uncertain territory for myself. I'm not a psychologist. I'm actually meant to be a molecular cell biologist. I do wonder how much we can bring from Reset to this dimension, which is also why we've started working very closely with behavioral scientists, behavioral economists even. So the good thing about our school, Julian will know this, is we're quite avid in bringing on board behavioral scientists and psychology, social science perspective. There is a very strong notion, at least on our campus community, that Singapore, or as a academic health system, we've done a lot for healthcare, and we're so good with healthcare now. And where the last mile could really be is this social aspect and behavioral aspect. If we manage to get if we really wanted to bend the rest of the curve for health improvement, it is this last mile of social science. So Reset is working together with behavioral experts. There's a few professors in our campus, as I mentioned, and we're leveraging them to think about how nudging can be placed into the randomized controlled trial we're carrying out. I'm also working with professors to think about this concept of early adoption. So there are some of us that are much more keen on new technology. So equally, there's some of us that are much more keen on knowing how to improve health for ourselves. So this, you imagine, would be the people that are doing everything they can, improving their lifestyles, etc. And how you recognize these people takes time if you want to interview them, spend questionnaires to look for these people. But there could be surrogate markers that can be used to identify these people. So we're trying to build a project where through Reset, we can map loads of different markers and find surrogate markers to identify who early adopters are for healthcare innovation. It's not just the taking up of the information, but actually also practicing it and maintaining it beyond just the taking up. So there's several dimensions to that, and we're working our way through understanding all of it.
I think, you know, one of the things that fascinates me about Project Reset is I see it as the tip of another iceberg. So and that iceberg is we're going to get more and more information about people. With this big data and electronic health record that is being introduced in Singapore, huge amounts of data about people's risk. And so we will get more and more fine-grained information about the sorts of diseases we'll suffer from, how long we will live, how well we'll live. And it's a little bit like a devil's offer, where the devil offers to tell you when you're going to die. And a lot of people have, in the genetics literature, I'm sure you're familiar with this, have worried about the anxiety that this sort of information causes, the mental health problems, fatalism. But on the other hand, there are medical interventions. You're going to offer them diet and exercise and different, behavioural interventions and perhaps even drugs. And then there's also information that you can use to plan retirement or travel or family. But I think this raises a kind of new level of medicine where everyone's at risk. And you actually, if you like, it's precision risk. You know more precisely what your risk is. How do you see that phase of medicine as we move from populations to kind of individual risk, and risk is ever present? Do you see this as a good thing, or are you concerned about it?
Definitely a good thing. I mean, I don't know about being too much concerned. This is something that I've brought up to my friends in insurance as well. They're being done out of a job. So as we get more and more precise, because insurance is about population statistics calculation at population level, but the whole notion of precision medicine and personalised is you're actually going to be able to predict that for a single person in himself. So, insurance is pointless, moot. I think this is the way the world is going, like it or not. We really do have more and more capabilities especially now with the AI feature into it as well. There will come a day when all of what you just described there, Julian, is possible.
Well, one of the concerns about this whole field, which is called bioprediction, the use of biological markers, including genes, but other information about your body to predict disease, is insurance. So the ordinary person is concerned that if they find out that they are at higher risk, now they're not going to be able to obtain, for example, life insurance or other forms of insurance. I mean, what's your response to that concern that people have?
Yeah, that's the whole point, because the way that research is going at the moment and all the kind of omics that we are doing, like you describe, is aiming towards being able to give someone a very precise and accurate prediction of whether they are going to have that or not, the disease. And the reason why insurance is there is to protect you from ever getting one or not getting that disease or not getting that disease. So there is a clash between the two. I don't know how that would be resolved. I mean, insurance would become pointless, as I said, when the time comes when people know what they will be getting or not getting.
I mean, I don't want to kind of spend all the podcast on this issue, and it's not something that I've thought about, but it doesn't seem to me to be pointless, because the point of insurance is to be able to compensate for or to provide support during adverse events, right? So say, at the moment you think your risk of heart disease is 50%.
No, that's only because the risk prediction now is not accurate. But if you're so precise and accurate,
but which
is where we're going to be one day.
Well, let's just say that, at the end of your project, I find out I'm not 50% likely to have a heart attack. I'm 80% likely. Yeah. And what I want is, if that doesn't mean I will certainly have a heart attack. And if I die, I want my 18-month-old son to have enough money to go to the expensive schools in Singapore. So I want to take out life insurance, but now they say, your risk isn't 50%, it's actually 80%. So, your premium is not, $10,000 a year, it's $30,000 a year. So, I don't see that it's going to make insurance obsolete, because I still want my son to be able, if I die prematurely, to be able to go to school here. So, I mean, I think that is quite worrying, because, the people who are lucky will actually not be pooling their risk with the people who are unlucky. So there's a concern of undermining of solidarity, that there'll be a kind of hierarchy of people, and it will disadvantage the genetically unlucky.
Yeah, I really don't have an answer to that question. I'm glad it's not my problem.
We'll deal with that in our part of the
I think what makes that more concerning, though, is it's not really just luck. Your health care outcomes, your health predictions are also based on your socioeconomic position. So, if you already are predisposed to worse healthcare outcomes, your insurance will go significantly up. But those who are quite well off already and therefore have better health, their insurance will go down. But that's not, that solidarity isn't there. We're no longer equal. In fact, we never were, but it's obvious now.
Well, I'm seeing disease as a balance between nature and nurture, where you are predisposed to something, by all the things that you're currently set up with, genetics, molecular, everything else. But if you did any change to your lifestyle, then you could be changing the course of your likelihood of getting that disease XYZ. But the trouble in the future, I am thinking, is that AI could predict that even of whether you're getting there. So that's where I start to see that insurance doesn't quite cover. I mean, I'm not sure what people would be insuring against if you know exactly where you'd be going.
I think I've accepted in my head that this insurance question is far bigger than the podcast, and that we might need teams of people working on, reestablishing, refiguring this out. I just had a thought about whether or not Reset will be testing for epigenetic changes, and whether what that means is we might be able to start to, use precise medicine to reverse those epigenetic changes. So
you might just tell people what epigenetic changes are.
Would you do the honours?
So actually the term epigenetics means different things to different people. That's partly also the trouble that I'm trying to figure out what the right answer to your question is. So we are definitely measuring molecules in the system that are known to change gene programs. And a lot of these molecules can be modified by drugs because by changing these molecules, you can then change gene programs and change the way the cells and tissues and organs behave. So from that point of view, we are measuring epigenetic profiles and epigenetic molecules.
So it's really whole genome and whole epigenome sequencing.
Yeah, definitely.
That's fascinating.
But there is also another aspect of epigenetics. When some people use that term, they're thinking of some unknown mechanism that is experienced by an individual that then gets passed on to subsequent generations. So that part of epigenetics, we're not really quite sure what the underpinnings are or drivers are. So we're not actually touching that in Reset.
So you're gathering these vast amount of information about individuals, about different, particularly cardiovascular risks, but other risks. But inevitably, you'll turn up other findings. So, I come into this project, say with a 10% chance of a heart attack, and, you do all these tests and you say, oh, no, Julian, actually we found you're, also at risk of X. Now, what might X be? What else might you find out about people in this, and what's going to be your approach to that?
Yeah, Julian, I'm sitting up because we are actually finding that out already now. There are patients, or not patients, because these are perfectly healthy people or apparently healthy people. They are already showing signs of cognitive impairment, and they are not aware of it. And this is alongside all the fatty liver and blocked arteries they were also finding.
Wow.
Are
you telling them?
Yeah, so there is the part of the questionnaire that says to them, do you want to know about incidental findings? We're keeping a very close eye on the whole counseling process on this, because this is a study on an apparently healthy person.
Yeah.
So you are going to unearth things, which is what the whole project set out to do.
You just say it's very early days and you've just started to uncover this, and it's to be expected because not only do you have disease in your heart, you also have disease in your brain that you didn't know about. Anecdotally, how do people take this?
I think we have prepared them before, in the consent process before the study started, that this is, you're studying your brain, you're studying your liver, etc., etc. So far, I think we have seen a few people already and brought them on board. We've also referred to neurologists for deeper analysis. I mean, it's still early days. They need further tests. It's not manifest disease, so that's why.
And are they going to be able to do anything about it? Or
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So hence the whole axiom about prevention better than cure, finding it earlier.
That gets me. Again, this is a difficult question, and I really don't expect you to sort of, and we certainly won't hold you to this answer. But I'm just trying to get a kind of an idea about what the magnitude of the sort of benefits on offer are for the ordinary person. So say, I enter this program and I've got a 10% chance of having a stroke or a heart attack in the next 10 years or 5 years or whatever it was. And I do the things that you tell me to do? And what would my chance of having those events change to? How much impact could this have on my life?
Yeah, I really can't tell you any fixed numbers to that. It's what we call residual risk, or missing factors that we haven't, and we think there are a lot more, at least today, and then resets unearthing those other ones. But beyond that, there may be others too. So yeah, it's really hard to know.
I only have a couple more questions, but you mentioned these new weight loss drugs like Ozempic or Wegovy. These are drugs based on semaglutide, which enters the brain, and apart from it changes brain activity, and a part of that reduces appetite. And you have quite striking effects in terms of weight loss and treatment of diabetes, reduction of cardiovascular risk, and really spectacular. So people basically lose huge amounts of weight and just don't want to eat. It's single-handedly resuscitated the Danish economy, the Danish company that produces it. So a lot of the Hollywood superstars are on these drugs. I mean, what do you say to somebody who says, well, we should be putting, Singaporeans on these, not just for the treatment of diabetes, but for prevention of cardiovascular risk? Because that's something we could do now. We don't need a 5-year project. There's data in now. Now, what's your response to this sort of, tsunami of enthusiasm for Ozempic?
Yeah, exactly. So people do wonder whether this is where Project Reset will go as well. If we find also targets like these and drugs get made and they actually then showing potentially usefulness for prevention, it's so easy to think that a drug will do it when asking people to exercise and nudging them doesn't actually get them over the line. Yeah, actually, I mean, great questions too, Julian. I don't know exactly what the right answers to this is. As a scientist, again, I would say that I've been really excited to see how the GLP-1 receptor agonists have been so successful at creating weight loss. And then also so revealing that at the end of the day, dealing with obesity, or maybe the bigger word is metabolism, is ending up driving so many different organs around the body. So it's not just, like you say, diabetes, but actually also heart, brain, the signals on vascular dementia improving because of this medicine, kidney, liver for sure. So metabolism is a huge driver for a lot of the ills that we're seeing on Earth, planet Earth today. So this, as you say, this company's made really a lot out of it.
Yeah, my understanding of the literature on this is that it has spectacular benefits, but only while you take the drug. Once you stop, you put the weight back on, which means great for the company, you're on the drug for life. Now that reduces people's eating and their feelings of fullness and social aspects of eating. But also it means that they're dependent on a drug in a way that they're not if they employ these lifestyle changes. And I think this is another kind of change in the trajectory of medicine, of putting people on drugs for life, for conditions like just what you put in your mouth, essentially. So some people will say this is over-medicalisation, of the human condition, that is medicine gone too far, having drugs now just because people can't stop eating. I mean, what do you say to that, to the sort of work that you're doing, that you're over-medicalising?
Again, I would just fall back and say I'm really excited by the science. So part of it is the discovery, when people set out doing genome-wide association studies on things like obesity and body sizes, everyone thought that some of those gene targets would come out around metabolic genes, mitochondrial genes that drive your energy utilization, etc. But it turned out that a large proportion, maybe 80-90% of the genes are actually genes that are expressed in the brain, in the hypothalamus, dealing with appetite, satiation, when you feel full after you've eaten. Some people have just eaten, but they're still happy to keep eating. And it really turned out that these are the genetic underpinnings and drivers of obesity, and hence the success of the semaglutide and no, it's not semaglutide specifically, but the GLP-1 receptor agonist drug.
So I wanted to just go back to this very striking, finding that when they looked for these genes for different body types, they weren't actually in the metabolism, they were in the brain. So, maybe this is a point to finish, but, one of the deepest questions in philosophy is whether free will exists and, what it is. And what you've raised is this possibility that just how much we eat isn't so much a matter of choice, it's a matter of the genes we happen to inherit and the way our brain is wired up. And I'm not expecting you to answer this sort of this millennia-old question about free will, but, as a person at the coalface that has to deal with people living, dealing with different lifestyle problems, lifestyle diseases, prevention of cardiovascular risk, how much free will do you think people have when it comes to managing their disease? What's your from the coalface sort of approach to this sort of issue of people's free will and responsibility?
My own conclusion is that we don't have free will. Free will is a figment of imagination. So the moment you think that you have a free will and decision-making power for yourself, you've already lost it.
Right.
There's so much influence, isn't there? I mean, Julian, you'd be a better person to say about this. Social media, the society, the people that we hang around, and there's no free will, really.
So do you think, Singapore, I love living in Singapore and, it's a fantastic experiment. And one of the things you do have is a sort of nimble and willing to act government. Do you think, given that we don't have free will, the government should be more involved in forming policies, legislating, for example, I was also at your launch, I think it was there that Minister Yong mentioned a kind of, providing alternative to sodium in salt to, reduce the problems from hawker food. But the government could include a massive sugar tax that would reduce people's consumption, or it could just ban certain amounts of sugar. Do you think the government should be taking a more active role in preventing these diseases?
Is there not a balance between being too much a nanny state versus giving someone too much liberty and going off and getting themselves overly fat and overly salted? I don't know, maybe there must be some sweet spot somewhere in between. I mean, people should have... people should be educated enough to make the right choices for themselves and be responsible.
They don't have any free will, so it's no point in educating if they don't have free will.
Roger's looking at me like, help.
Where is the choice coming from?
I think we'll probably leave it there. I think those are questions maybe for a book or several books or a volume of books for us to answer. I've really enjoyed this chat today with you, Roger, and Julian too, I believe. So thank you so much for coming on this podcast. You're welcome back anytime.
Very grateful.
Maybe in 5 years.
Yeah. Don't ask such tough questions about ethics next time.
Roger will not be coming back. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for listening to our new podcast. Subscribe online and tune in every first of the month. In the meantime, listen to CBmE&U and be savvy.